giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us. And I would say at the end of this period, I think it could very well end up being a very good deal for everybody, as good as if we went all the way and just literally annihilated the place, which if we don't have to do that, that would be a good thing, not a bad thing.
Oil traders watching closely as President Trump says America is ready for diplomacy, but Tehran is calling peace talks with the USA a trap. Welcome back to the second hour of the Big Money Show. I'm Brian Brenberg, along with my delightful co-hosts. And with us for the hour, Forbes media chairman and editor-in-chief Steve Forbes, also delightful himself. Good to see you, sir.
Good to be with you.
All right.
The sun is out, so it is delightful.
The sun is right here on set. All right, the president's pause on energy infrastructure strikes is keeping oil prices at bay, but the conflict is raging on. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are inching toward joining the fight as Iran keeps launching missiles at its Gulf neighbors. But the White House says energy costs won't get out of control.
We want a lower cost for Americans. We want to drive wages up. We had gasoline prices below $3 a gallon, and we'll again have gasoline prices below $3 a gallon. But to fix this long-term, decades-long problem with Iran, we're all going to have to suffer a little pain. But there's all sorts of things we are doing to mitigate that. You know, releasing strategic petroleum reserves, temporarily unsanctioning oil so we can get into refineries.
Steve Forbes, this is kind of a crystal ball question, but do you think we're going to get a deal this week with Iran?
The question is, what kind of deal? And the Iranians, the mullahs, are behaving as usual, pretending to be highly reluctant. And the blunt truth is on this whole situation is if that regime survives, they win. And the free world and America loses. So these negotiations, unless it's regime change, it's not good. And the Russians will be happy, the Chinese will be happy, the North Koreans will be happy, but the rest of the world is going to lose. So I hope this isn't a trap that we've fallen into before. Don't want to see us falling into it again.
Jackie.
Yeah, I've been saying that also, that regime change is for the people, certainly, but it's also part of the military objective, that you can't take control of the Strait of Hormuz and still have this radical regime in charge in Iran. They will always cause problems. So how long do you want to play whack-a-mole with them going into the future? I don't think President Trump does. I think he sees this as part of his legacy to really take this regime out by the root and restructure the Middle East and how Iran interacts with the rest of the world. Selfishly, as somebody whose mother immigrated here before the revolution and has seen the brutality of some of this, I want to see that regime change for the people as well. After 47 years, I think they deserve a chance to take their country back and things would be a lot better. But the question is, where do we go from here? And what is the posturing that President Trump is doing in this 5-day pause? Is he getting his ducks in a row to do something else? Because I don't really believe deep down that he's talking to anybody there. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner sat down and talked to the Iranians, and they said, we have the capability to have a certain amount of nuclear weapons in X amount of time. And they came home and said, okay, the operation is necessary. And here we are with Operation Epic Fury. So what talking is there to do?
It's a tricky question, Dagan. I just throw out there, Venezuela to me looms large as a model, because in Venezuela, we didn't rip out the regime by its roots. We just got rid of what we thought was the worst part. Delcy Rodriguez, maybe she's nobody's favorite, but a lot of the administration talks like they can deal with her. Do you think that model is what they have in mind with Tehran?
I don't think that you can compare
Venezuela
and the terrorist theocracy of Iran. They're two completely different entities. I was going to say beasts, but I don't want to even equate it that way. Rodriguez, Venezuela, that is a dicta blanda. In essence, the United States has kept, it's a blind dictatorship. That
my Latin is not great, so I'm glad you said that.
They kept the regime in place, and they're working with the United States. That, what is in Iran, how do you see a way, how do you get to regime change? Because that is not the stated goal that has come out of the mouth of a Marco Rubio. It's come out of the mouth of Israel from the beginning, but not out of the mouths of the leadership in the United States, Steve.
The president
Regime
mentioned
change.
it, but he hasn't in a while. That was like the first days.
But it was dismantle the stockpile of missiles and drones, dismantle the production capability for missiles and drones, the nuclear program.
That kind of destruction can be repaired, as we've seen in the past. If that regime stays in, it tells the world America doesn't have the stamina to see things through. Russia's going to draw conclusions in Ukraine. Chinese are going to draw conclusions. So destroying stuff, yeah, very good. Destroying the factories, absolutely essential. But if that regime stays in, we know what's going to happen. They're going to eventually rebuild and come back. Look, what had Germany after World War I came back. Look at Egypt after the Six-Day War in '67. 6 years later, they nearly defeated Israel in the field, and without our aid, they might have done it. So these regimes can come back. And if that snake is still there, it's going to bite again, and the Arab nations and the world will know.
I'm not disagreeing.
They can close the Strait of Hormuz.
I'm not
so
disagreeing.
You keep at them until you create the conditions, especially those local militias.
Yeah.
You keep destroying that infrastructure so that people have a chance to rise up, and they're parts of the military, made up of conscripts and officers who are not really part of this regime. I know we're talking to them. I'm sure we are. I don't know firsthand, obviously. But so create conditions for regime change. Again, if that regime stays, the world loses.
I don't disagree with you with the why and the goal, but it's the how long. That's what the president has to say to the American people,
Exactly.
how long and what the cost is.
Well, we don't know
in
how
dollars
long.
and in lives.
And well, we don't know. But the thing is, that's why he should do a nationwide address, not behind a podium, but behind the office desk in the Oval Office, and calmly explain why we have to do it. We're going to see it through, whether it's 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever it takes, that regime must go. Because if we don't, the world will conclude the U.S. does not have the stamina, the backbone that we had during the Cold War. And one way or the other, the regime has to go. We don't know what internal conditions will bring it about, but we're going to stay at it until it goes. Period.
Let me go to Taylor on this. The reason I press the point about Venezuela, one, it's just interesting to talk about because it's a model out there. But two, I think in certain quarters that are very disillusioned with regime change experiments in recent decades, they see what we're doing in Venezuela as a more America first policy.
Right.
So it's not our job to bring democracy to Venezuela. It's not our job to bring prosperity to Venezuela. It's our job to keep America safe. And if we can, the most limited move possible in Venezuela that keeps us safe is the best use of our resources. Strait of Hormuz would be an example of this. Ask the president, what's your plan on that? He said, I envision a joint thing, okay? Well, with who? Well, I think that the unspoken second party of that is somebody in Iran. So we may not like the idea, but it is a very living idea, I think, in the America First movement.
I think Iran has isolated itself so much that you're starting to see more pressure, specifically around the Strait of Hormuz. So there were a big joint, a lot of countries had signed on to this big statement saying, we condemn and reject Iran blocking the strait and attacking commercial vessels or oil vessels. So Bahrain just joined that statement, and the UAE's on that statement. Everyone else, 30 other nations, it's mostly like Latin America and Europe. But you're getting finally enough pressure that I think those Gulf nations that we talked about last hour are starting to say enough is enough. If you have Bahrain and the UAE starting to say, Iran, knock it off, you're pissing us off, you're stopping oil, we need the Strait of Hormuz open, you get enough pressure that could put Iran on its back foot. Now, there are some Middle East experts and some notes that I was reading saying that if Iran continues to block the strait, you could have sort of these regional Gulf nations team up together, similar to how they took on ISIS and the Islamic State with Iraq and Syria, where if they go in together, that puts enough pressure on Iran that maybe Iran caves and starts to open it up. I don't know. The only other curveball, I'm doing a little bit of a bird walk, but bear with me, We've talked about funding and financing. I just wanted to put on the radar, 2-year yield ahead of bond auction. Yields are up 8-9 basis points on the day. You have a 2-year now at a 3.93. The Fed funds target rate's a 3.50 to a 3.75. I don't want to go out there, but that's effectively the market trying to push for a hike. Not really, but saying that 2-year yields are higher than where the Fed is telling me that they want 2-year yields to be. Another note this morning said we could, in the next year, look at $14 trillion in investment-grade supply coming online between Treasury and corporate hyperscalers issuing debt.
Yeah.
That's a lot of debt. It's a lot of supply. It means yields are rising. How much does that pressure credit spreads and rising yields at all? Just want to also put that out there from a market perspective.
And that's what
I'll rephrase what Taylor said in a supply-demand equate from a supply-demand standpoint, that if you have a United States that's going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on this conflict, and I think it'll be back of the envelope, at least $1 trillion. We're talking about $200 billion right now. $200 billion doesn't even add up to 2 months of our interest on the national debt right now. We're running about $104 billion per month in just interest. But we're already having some funding hiccups, kinks. Let me just finish what I was going to say, Steve. Because the Federal Reserve started quantitative easing again in December, which means they had to soak up supply of debt because the buyers weren't there naturally in the market. To your point, because 2-year, 10-year yields have gone up, those investors are saying, we are demanding higher rates on your borrowing because you're going to be delivering more supply to the market.
And that's the kind of thing the Iranians and the Russians and the Chinese are counting on, that if we get some discomfort in trying to make the world safe, that we're going to back off. We didn't back off in the Cold War most of the time, and we won the Cold War. So if we back off here, 2 years may go above 4%, then the rest of the world knows you can't count on America. That means countries like Japan and South Korea will go nuclear. It means China's going to make some moves we don't want to make a move, and Putin thinks he's going to win the Ukraine war and move against NATO. They all tie together.
Can I make one point just about the situation in Iran specifically? When I talk about regime change and what I think the president envisioned when he mentioned it in the beginning, and he said there will be a time for the people to be able to rise up, I do still think that that is his vision. I don't think there's any plan for us to go in there and try to do anything like we did in Iraq or anything like that. But what makes this situation a little more complicated is, even though you've taken out these heads of the regime, some of the really nasty players, you've got this IRGC, which is their leg of the army that is controlled by them. And the IRGC is what's holding on to power right now. And then you've got the rest of the army, which is more of like, a people-populated army, I'll call it. In past situations, when we've seen people rise up, it ends up being that the head leader is taken out and the army is the people, and they won't shoot their own people. But in this case, the IRGC will. So they're part of the root of this. And if I were Israel, if I were the United States, I would be looking at how to get the commanders to break that system down. That's how the people will feel safe enough to come onto the street without guns.
I think the Israelis are doing that.
Yeah.
They know it needs to be done.
But Steve, to your point, yes, the United States should not be cowed by borrowing costs and investors, but where was our responsibility financially and fiscally anticipating this day? Instead, we have been led by profligacy on the right, on the left, and right down the middle in the center. We act like that, yeah, we can actually borrow as much as we want at a cost. And the people who wind up paying for it are the American people.
This was a terrific conversation. It will continue most certainly, but we got to move on to FedEx.